Hey folks, I'm Spencer, and on today's episode of Mania we're looking at the debut of the first superhero from New Jersey, the Toxic Avenger.
The Toxic Avenger is coming to your town. Look out!
Released in 1984, the Toxic Avenger was directed by Michael Hertz and Lloyd Kaufman of Troma Entertainment. Up until this point, Troma had been making some sex comedies like nudie type stuff. But after the Toxic Avenger came out, they were set on a path of gore, bad taste, and, well, all the nudie stuff stuck around anyway. The story kicks off with Melvin, a weedy mop boy who works in what is possibly the most sexualised gym ever committed to the screen.
Meet little Melvin. He's a 90-pound weakling.
But after he gets on the wrong side of the local nasties, they decide to pull a prank on him, which, as you can imagine, goes horribly wrong, and Melvin falls into a vat of toxic waste that has been parked outside for some reason.
Had a horrifying accident and fell into a vat of nuclear waste.
The radioactive waste leaves him horribly disfigured but turns him into an absolute beefcake. And with his newfound strength he decides to rid Tromaville of the scum. I mean, that's pretty much it for the plot. There's not much else going on, but I mean, what were you expecting? You're here to watch a deformed man beat the poo out of people.
I don't know what it was, but it saved my life.
That's not to say the film isn't interesting in between all of the punching the poo out of the people. I mean, every character in the film is engaging. Basically by that I mean that everyone in this film is overacting more so than I think you can find in pretty much any other film. Every character is caricature. I mean, Melvin as a mop boy is ridiculously nerdy. All of the baddies are just so extremely vile and reprehensible. I mean, they really are the worst. Anyone really that even pops up as a side character has just some weird personality trait. You know, you have the police officer that does Nazi salutes, you have the mayor who is rather portly and is constantly eating sandwiches. I think actually having all of these characters be so over the top and so overacted really helps the film. It gives it a sort of cartoony style, and I mean, it probably gets around the fact that most of these people probably don't know how to act. I mean, if you've been cast in this film, if you're a man, it's probably because you are a bit weird or you are very buff, and if you are a woman in this film, it is probably because you are either very weird or you were happy to have your boobs out on camera.
His face is so terrifying.
I mean, let's be honest, I don't think most people were coming to the Toxic Avenger because they were looking for an acting lesson. They have come here because they want to see buckets and buckets of gore. And I will say, if that is what you are coming here for, I think you will leave pretty happy. You've got arms being ripped off, heads being squashed, you've got people being like deep fat fried, and all of this is pretty decent. I mean, the blood's quite dark, which it does look a bit bleh. And I mean, the Toxic Avenger makeup itself is, I will call serviceable. I mean, it's not very good, but this goes for a lot of the gore. It's the right side of cheesy. It is entertainingly cheesy rather than just ropey and bad.
Okay, you motherfucker!
If you are going to track this film down, please do yourself a favour and try and find an uncut version of it. I mean, this 88 films version is the uncut one. Look, if you're looking at if anything's cut, make sure you've got the head crushing scene, because if that's in the film, I think everything else is, and because that's the sort of the trouble spot for the film, and it is actually pretty gross. I'm not going to spoil it because it's pretty damn good. The action that goes along with all these scenes is okay. I mean, you're not going to confuse this film with any of the sort of big budget superhero films we have today. But I mean, the trade-off to that is that you can't watch any of DC or Marvel's finest beating up pedos in an alleyway. So, you know, it's give and take.
Alright everybody, drop your tacos or I'll blow your brains out!
A lot of the action in this film sort of gets away with just being people swinging wild punches or doing sort of flying karate kicks, because the gore that goes alongside them is very creative, and there is just a sort of, we don't have the money to do this, but we're going to give it our best shot anyway. I mean, some of the stunt work in this is quite impressive, especially when you presume that it's just some poor bloke who doesn't have any stunt training going, yeah, you can set me on fire, or yeah, I'll crash this car, I'm sure I'll come out the other end fine. And to be honest, I'm sure everyone did come out fine, and it means that the film is a lot more exciting than a lot of other low-budget films of this type.
The Toxic Avenger can bend steel with his bare hands.
What perhaps doesn't work in this film quite as well is a lot of the sort of attempts at comedy. A lot of the film sort of revolves around bad taste, oh you can't say that or you can't show that comedy. I mean, all of Troma's films do, so I mean, if you know anything about them, you know exactly what you're getting yourself in for.
You know, I always did want to cornhole me a blind bitch. Ow!
And I wouldn't say anything in the film is particularly, like, I wouldn't call it cripplingly offensive, but it is worth noting, I think perhaps if it's something you were concerned about, I would watch a trailer. That should probably give you a good enough sense. I mean, it's all, what are you going to find offensive? I mean, as an attempt at a reference point, I have seen people compare Troma films to sort of a live-action South Park, which I think is fair. I mean, Matt and Trey actually started their career making Cannibal the Musical for Troma, but perhaps with South Park they get away with a bit more because there is a bit more satire to it, whereas you aren't really getting that with Troma. I mean, there are perhaps a couple of points where you can go, oh, that's about how the government mistreat the environment, but I mean, it is paper thin. It is mainly just gross and crude because it can be. And I think if you can get behind that, then that's fine. The film is competently made. I mean, you are never going to mistake the film for a big budget film or a medium budget film, but in terms of low budget films, it's well made. Everything appears to be in the frame, everything is in focus. I do like that when there are gory scenes, the camera never shies away from it. You get a good look at the prosthetics even if they are a bit ropey, which is nice. It's nice to see someone confident in what they are making. If you come into the film for boobs, I'm sure you will leave happy.
I want to do it with you.
I think it's mainly just you need to remember that because this is a low budget film, it is never going to particularly blow your mind. This isn't something like Evil Dead where the camera work is phenomenal. I mean, there are some shots where they have like spinny newspapers in a sort of Batman style, and I mean, it is just a newspaper put on like a Lazy Susan or whatever, and they've just spun it and put the camera over it. You know, everything is done in the most sort of cheap, efficient way, but it's charming. The film's soundtrack is a sort of weird mismatch of pop scoring. I mean, a lot of the stuff in here is sort of weird 80s sort of pop tunes that, I mean, you'll hear a lot of a song called Body Talk, which sounds like something you'd do aerobics to. And, I mean, you will hear it a lot. So it's quite a good thing that it's not that bad. It's quite catchy, actually. That can't be said for every song in the soundtrack. I mean, there is a sort of love song, it's not quite like a ballad or anything, that is used over sort of a montage of a relationship, and I mean, it's cringy enough as it is, and then the song is clearly too short for the montage, so it just sort of jumps back. You can so obviously tell when the chorus starts playing again and that it wasn't supposed to. But again, it's a bit amateur, but it's endearing. It just adds to the film's low budget niceness.
Leap small cars in a single bound.
The film was actually a pretty big hit. I mean, we're talking a big hit in terms of the sort of thing Troma were putting out. And we actually got 3 more Toxic Avenger films. 2 and 4 are pretty good films. I mean, 3 is much more on the ropey side from memory. We have, bizarrely, a Broadway musical, and the most weird, a Saturday morning kids cartoon called The Toxic Crusaders, which I'm pretty sure you can find all of on YouTube. There has also been talk of making a new Toxic Avenger. I know Arnold Schwarzenegger was attached to it at one point, but he isn't anymore. I don't know, I'd be quite up for seeing a newer, slightly more polished version. I mean, Toxie has become Troma's mascot. He pops up in loads of their behind-the-scenes stuff. I mean, I think his face is the logo now. Troma have been just plugging away ever since. They've never stopped making films. They've made some really interesting, good films. They've been the start for a lot of great directors. I mean, James Gunn is probably now the most famous person to have come through their stable. I mean, this isn't to say, I mean, they have made some utterly atrocious films, and probably more bad films than good films, but they are always Troma films, and if you like one Troma film, you will probably find that you can find something to enjoy in any of them. That being said, I mean, Toxic Avenger and any Troma film is an acquired taste. I mean, you have to have a level of trash tolerance, you have to be able to put up with ropey effects, people who can't act, people just, you know, people wandering around in the woods with the camera type filmmaking. Plus there is, are you going to find it offensive? I don't think they're that bad. I mean, Toxic Avenger's 35 years ago, so there is stuff in there that you probably wouldn't do these days. That being said, I think there are probably films that have come out this year that are more offensive. I think in part, Troma have always treated everyone as a target. It doesn't matter who you are, they will happily poke fun at you. So I think that makes it a bit more fair game. I am aware though that I am saying this as, you know, a white guy, so I am a lot more privileged in that I'm probably not targeted quite as much by these sorts of things. Like I said, I think checking a trailer beforehand is probably a good way to go if you are concerned that it may offend you. I really don't think, nothing in these films is particularly mean-spirited. It's all just, can be just perhaps a little bit juvenile at times.
He crushes drug pushers.
But that's just my opinion. Have you seen The Toxic Avenger? Do you think it's great? Do you think that Troma are one of the worst companies ever? I know that is an opinion out there, which are fair. Let me know down in the comments. Like and subscribe so you don't miss any more videos, and I'll see you next time.